in March that I have seen in so long. Go ahead, Trisha, get us started. It is Virtual Career Tuesday. It is 55 degrees outside in March in Connecticut. I am the happiest person in the world right now. And I am so excited to introduce and to welcome the team from Slalom. We have Kelly Abat, or is it a bait?
Abate, it's a bait.
Yeah. So one of my dearest friends is Abat, and I always look at it and say it wrong the first time. So Kelly Abate, who I've known for so many years, and so excited to have her back. And then Ethan Sachs, very excited to have you join us, and love the keyboard in the background there, Ethan.
Thank you very much. Oh, yes.
In my house, we just have pictures of musical instruments because I don't use any of them. All right, so the way that we do this for all the students that are joining us and for the students that will be joining us later is Slalom is one of the top consulting firms in the area, and the way they describe themselves, I think, is interesting, is a modern consulting firm focused on strategy, technology, and business transformation. So the way that we do these sessions is this is very laid back, right? And Kelly, I have to tell you that when I read your LinkedIn, even though we've known each other for years, I loved your summary.
Thank you.
I'm a casual, uninhibited, persuasive extrovert with a tendency for informality. That is pretty much the definition of Virtual Career Tuesday.
I love it.
That is the reason that we hold these in this format, so that we can talk, right? So our goal is for the students to learn more about synchrony, I'll be all right, about Slalom. And the hope is that by attending this session, they get some insight that they wouldn't necessarily know when they're getting ready to interview and apply. So I'm going to actually let you introduce Ethan so you can tell everybody who he is.
Yeah. So Ethan, my friend, he just celebrated his 1-year anniversary with Slalom last month. He was in the, he is an associate consultant. We kind of redid our career framework in what's called our Consulting Foundations program. And so Ethan is actually in our data and analytics practice. And I invited him here today because I just always think that it's more valuable to hear from somebody who's actually been in the job and is living and breathing it for the past year and doing it. So Ethan, thank you so much for joining us. He was in the last cohort that snuck out, and you'll learn more about our program, but he did get to travel. They snuck in that travel right before COVID hit. So he was fortunate enough to get that experience. But
And one of the things, for those of you that did your research before today, is Slalom lists right on their LinkedIn page their core values, right? So a big part of who the company is how they tie those core values back to everything. So Kelly, I'm going to actually take a step back and let you kind of go through the process of what do we need to know about Slalom?
Yeah, so I'm really happy that you started with the core values, Kathy. And so I am cheating because I have them in front of me because this always comes up when I present, but it is do what is right always, drive connection and teamwork, take ownership, get it done, inspire passion and adventure, focus on outcomes, celebrate authenticity, which is my favorite, fuel growth and innovation, stay humble and curious, and build and shape a better future. So I think there are very few of us who can kind of rattle those off, but yeah, so to your point, Kathy, I mean, our core values are really the DNA of how we operate, not only with our clients, but also with our people. And so we are a privately held company. We were founded back in 2001 by our CEO, Brad Jackson, and our co-founder, John Tobin. John is actually the one who came up with our core values. For a long time in the 90s, Brad has actually owned his own staffing firm. So he was a recruiter by trade and was always really interested in management consulting. And I'll kind of keep the long story kind of not as long, but John was actually a candidate that Brad was trying to place for an executive level role at Starbucks. And they got to talking. John had come from EY. He worked with a bunch of startup companies before. And so they kind of got to talking, and long term, John said that he wanted to start his own consulting firm. And so Brad was able to talk him into turning down the role at Starbucks that paid a lot more money than Brad was able to pay John, and have him join what was then called 2 Degrees Consulting in 2001. We rebranded as Slalom in 2004. Really what makes us different is our what we call a localized model. So for the most part, for every market, we aka office, but each we call it markets, which are there are about 39 now globally. We support clients and our communities in and around the location of the market. So John had spent a lot of time traveling away from his family when he was in his consulting days. And so it was really important for him when he created Slalom that employees work where they live. So we have what we call a no unwanted travel policy. Currently, we are getting close to 9,000 employees. We did have a very, very brief hiring pause last year, just kind of given COVID, but we're ramping up again. I think I saw in the Northeast, we are up to 130 hires, which Ethan was up. If you were at the State of the Office meeting, it was like 86 hires a couple of weeks ago. But globally, we're predicted to hire an additional 3,000 people this year. So really making up for lost time.
Well, there's an exciting part of that for everybody that's on this call right now.
Yeah.
Ethan, what was it like joining in right before the world shut down?
Oh, it was lovely. It was a nice little sojourn before everything fell apart, for lack of a better word. I got a full 5 days in the office, and then they shipped us out to Denver for 2 weeks for boot camp. And I had to leave boot camp a day early to make sure I got home before flights were shut down. And I haven't left my home office since.
We were probably in Denver at the exact same time, because I was in Denver the day that they shut down like all the ski slopes and all the mountains. And my kids were not happy about that. But yeah, came home from Denver and haven't left since. All right, so tell me, like, what was your interview process like, Ethan? Because that's a big part of what we try to do on Virtual Career Tuesdays is what's the process like? What do the people that are on here right now need to know?
I don't think my interview process would be indicative of what anybody on this call would necessarily go through. I wasn't hired directly out of college. I had 5 years of consulting experience beforehand. So I don't think I had necessarily the same jumping off point as anybody here would. But I can speak to my experience once I got in the room, which I can assume people will feel out as well. It was a lot of talking to a number of people in different areas, either directly related or peripherally related to whatever my focus was going to be. And there wasn't a whole lot of focus on what I was on paper. There wasn't a lot of interest in just reading off of the resume. It was a very engaging conversational experience where I felt like I was being vetted on how I would fit the culture, how I would contribute to the company at large. And I know as far as my experience within data and analytics, it was a lot of, how do I say this? Not what I knew coming in the door, but what I had the capacity to learn and what skills I had the propensity to acquire. There was a real emphasis once I was hired, which I didn't really hear the pitch leading up to it, but I think it's hugely important that people know it's a company that hires learners, not doers. And that was something that was really pressed in the interviews. I didn't know it at the time that that's exactly what they were challenging me. I would just walk out exhausted.
Yeah.
But yeah, I went to undergrad for theater and psychology. I was not writing SQL queries in JavaScript in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But I demonstrated that I had the capacity and the interest in the investment in those fields.
Mhm.
And what I feel as far as the interview experience is concerned is that's what they wanted to see. They wanted to see that I could learn, that I could pick up things quickly, that I could commit myself to them until I was able to meet delivery for whatever project or um, client that I was staffed on.
Mhm. That probably goes back to where you were saying, the core values is authenticity, right? So you had to convince them in that room that who you said you were is who you were, and that curiosity side to help you learn everything you need to know after that. We talk about that to students a lot when we say it's not, a job description is a wish list, right? You don't have to know how to use Java, like in your sleep, if you can be the person that can talk to a client and help embrace who they are and help understand what their needs are and then take it to the next level. I just want to ask this question because I'm getting feedback. Is it okay for the sound quality on everyone? Okay. All right. So Kelly, do you want to take that one for a minute? Because we do have, Ethan, to your point of you came in a little bit different. We do have graduate students on the call as well as undergraduate students. So some of them are going to be coming into the interview with experience, but in different areas. So the idea that you had the theater, education kind of blends the idea that when you're coming into the program, it's about what you can learn. So Kelly, can you talk a little bit about what you would be looking for initially?
Yeah, sure. So I forgot to mention this earlier, but we are here not only representing our Hartford office, but I did want to call out that we have several offices in the Northeast who will be hiring for what we call now the Consultant Foundations program. So we have Hartford. In Hartford, we're really strictly focused on building out our technology talent. So we're just hiring on the technology side. But we have a market in Boston, Philadelphia, Westchester, Princeton, New Jersey, and New York City. And I believe all of those offices are still hiring. But in terms of what we look for, so I mentioned kind of technology, right? So we have two kind of what I refer to as practice area umbrellas. So we have business advisory services and then technology advisory services. And so underneath business advisory services, we call it BAS for short. We're really focused on obviously business degrees. We're not so strict on majors. When you think about it, when we hire associate consultants into BAS, they do kind of a rotation, just sort of based on what their interests are. So there are 3 different practice areas underneath BAS. We have delivery leadership, so that's more folks who specialize as project and program managers. Then we have strategy and operations. And then in Hartford, and this is kind of, it differs from market to market, we have a new team called Experience. So specific to Hartford, we found that a lot of our experience design work kind of overlapped with our organizational effectiveness practice. So we basically just combined 2 practices and it's called Experience. But essentially in other markets, they have an organizational effectiveness practice that kind of stands alone. And then on the technology side, we have, in terms of what we hire for associate consultants, we have data and analytics, and then we have, we hire for cloud enablement, and then Salesforce as well. So on the technology side, so everybody kind of goes through a consulting foundations from a global perspective when they start. But then after that's over, we have specific technology academies. So again, one for data and analytics, cloud. At the end of cloud or towards the end, you'll be able to get your certification for AWS cloud practitioner. You can go on to be solution architect. And then on the Salesforce side, there's a technical academy for that.
Okay. So when people would be looking to apply, Kelly, is it they would go on Slalom's website and look for these different categories, or is it kind of an umbrella role?
Yeah, sometimes it's an umbrella role. It really depends on the way the markets post. So I would look for kind of market by market, and it's just slalom.com/careers. There is actually a page that should, if recruiters coded it right, there's a page specifically for associate consultants, and you can kind of browse through that website to see the different locations who are still hiring for them.
Okay, excellent. And I know you do so much more than just kind of the recruiting side, but if you were going to look at a UConn resume, are there certain things that you tend to look for?
Yeah, so outside of major, I mean, we're not too picky with GPA. We don't have standard requirements for that at all. But I would say, you know, we talked a lot about our core values. And so folks who are in leadership positions on campus, whether it be in student clubs or organizations, I always like to see that people worked through their college experience. Obviously, specific internship experience is always kind of a nice to have. I wouldn't say it's an absolute requirement. And then just, I mean, really, and Ethan said it, it's really about the conversation. So if I'm scanning through a resume, those are kind of the highlights that I look for. But for me, and for everybody at Slalom, you know, it's more about the conversation and the core values fit.
Right. And it's one of those things where, like, you know, candidates will tell us this all the time. I know if I could just get in the room, I could convince them that I'm a strong candidate for the job. It's just, you got to get in the room, right?
Yeah.
So which do you use LinkedIn when you're looking at candidates?
Sorry, you broke up for a second. Do we use LinkedIn, you said?
Yeah.
Yes and no. It depends on the market, I think, and the volume that we get for applicants. But yeah, I know my colleague Danny has been sourcing for associate consultants on the tech side. And so we'll kind of plug in some different like C#, Java, Python, things of that nature. That kind of comes top of mind just based on just some of the technologies certs that we're looking for specifically on that side of the house.
Okay. And, you know, so you talk about like adventure and curiosity as being part of the core values. Like, give us an example. How does somebody show that on paper? Is that, you know, having those different experiences?
Yeah, I definitely think it's different experiences. I always like, and too on their LinkedIn profiles and on the resume, when people list their hobbies or things they're interested in, or like, I know on LinkedIn, I always love to read people's summaries. That's why I have one. And so always like just kind of making it interesting and different. My pet peeve is when I go onto somebody's LinkedIn page and all they have is just name of the company and their job title. There's like no description of what they do or what they're interested in. And so that makes it really hard. I also find like tagging skills. I like to look through the companies that people are following as well, just to kind of get insight into that. Those are some of the things that kind of really stand out for me.
Right. And for those of you that don't know, like, I started this conversation by saying that Kelly and I have known each other for years. Recruiters go to different companies, right? So Kelly's had experience at the Hartford Financial, and then at Lego, and now at Slalom. So even when you're looking like at new candidates for Slalom, there's still that part of you that knows that when you were looking for people for the finance leadership program at the Hartford, there's certain skills that are pretty relevant to what School of Business and undergraduate and graduate students have. So there's that wonderful familiarity that you have already when you're looking at candidates from UConn.
Yes.
Now, we do have students that are on, and I also want to give a shout out to Christina, because Christina, I know that you've met Christina Bedini from UConn, from George office. So Christina, thanks for joining us as well. But I want to open this up a little bit and be mindful of everybody's time. For students who want to put a question into the chat, and then we can call on you. While, you know, Kelly can kind of give us a little more insight on what the interview process would be like for, you know, the more traditional type role.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And it does vary a little bit from market to market, but I can kind of speak specifically to what we do in Hartford. So typically, your first conversation will be with a recruiter. And so what we do is kind of focus on background, right? Like all the standard things, going through the resume, talking about career path. But what I really like to focus on is, you know, what are your passions? What do you like to do? What gives you energy? What motivates you? What are some things that maybe you had an internship and you didn't really love it? Well, and that's totally okay, right? Try before you buy. But why didn't you like it? So kind of digging into that a little bit, and then just giving an overview of kind of the timeline, and then also the program, going into a little more details. Typically, second round is with a leader or somebody who would be like a senior consultant to do kind of a technical screen. And that kind of goes on both sides of the fence for both the business advisory services and tech. So obviously on the tech side, in the past, we've asked people to like handwrite code. We have people go a little bit more into the systems and codings and kind of test their knowledge in that, because sometimes it's textbook, other times they can go really deep. If you pass that technical screen, then we would kind of go on to third and then final round interviews. And you know, I always say, like, you would come back to the building two other times, but obviously it may feel a little bit different and feel like you're meeting with a lot more people. But we really, because we hire for a core values fit, we focus a lot on competency-based interviews. And so our interviewers will focus more on those competencies. So more of behavioral interview type of questions, but we make it a conversation because that's our culture and that's how we are. So we don't do case studies specific to Hartford. I know that New York City does, and I believe Boston does that as well, but it really depends on what track you want to follow. But that's pretty much what it looks like.
Okay, so I see that we do have one question, but I just want to ask this, Kelly, that first interview, is that a phone interview or video?
Always video.
Always video. Okay, so even like when the world opens up again, you're going to start with a video interview before you get into the office?
That's a loaded question. I think in near term, yes. Yeah, I don't know what our policies are going to be kind of going back in, but yeah, typically video will be first step.
Okay. All right. So Nolan, you have your hand up if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to get this in because I have to leave in like 5 minutes. So you were talking about the business advisory service associate consultant role, and I was looking it up on your careers page, and I don't see really any current postings for it. I might just be looking wrong, but is that something that you're going to start recruiting for more right now, or is probably me not finding it mean that most of them are filled?
Are you looking in a specific market or all of them?
I just have the location for all, and I put in the keywords consult and associate, and not seeing a ton.
I do think that there are markets hiring for them. I know we're not always the best, and sometimes we call them different things, but if you do, I don't know, Kathy, if you're collecting resumes or how it works, but if you send it to Kathy, I can kind of take that as a follow-up. On my end, we in Hartford, we are not hiring on the business advisory services side because we did hire a large group of those folks last year. But I think, like I said, I believe other markets are hiring on the business side.
Okay. Thank you.
So I threw my email in there. Other questions from students that are on? You can either put it in the chat or do the same thing that Nolan did and raise your hand. This is your chance to say hello.
Looks like we have another question in the chat.
Would you be able to explain the interview process again? Okay, so Kelly, do you want to take that one? First round video?
Yep. So first round is video with a recruiter, and then kind of second and third rounds, and sometimes fourth rounds, depending, would be with different leaders of the organization. So kind of after the first round with recruiters, second round would be more technical screening with a leader. And then third and fourth rounds are focused on kind of competency-based interview. So more behavioral based.
Excellent. Ethan, I'm going to ask you a question. So you've been there for like over a year now. What surprised you about Slalom as being different from other companies that you work for? And I don't mean that you have to throw Slalom or yourself under the bus, just it's a consulting firm that really focuses on those core values and that interpersonal side. So what's it like working there in that kind of environment?
It's fantastic.
Which
Thank you
of
for the
course is
question.
the answer you would give.
Yeah, yeah. um, it's been an incredible experience. I can't stress the core values enough. It's not something that's just for show. There's um, active attention paid to that, and while we strive to steer our clients towards those as well, it the employees come first in a lot of ways. And I think especially during the pandemic, Slalom really showed its colors and in regard to staying true to those core values and putting their employees first. I think there is a constant emphasis on building the staff up, um, learning new skills, providing new opportunities. Um, and I would say like piggybacking on that and backtracking just slightly to like getting in the room and going through all of those interviews, at least from my experience, that's what they're looking for is like opportunities in which you have already embodied those core values, whether you knew it or not, or whether you knew that the company was looking for it or not. Here's an opportunity where I took ownership and I got something done. I pushed myself in a way that I wasn't comfortable with, or I helped contribute to my community. There is a real emphasis within the company to um, give back and contribute. And I think that's what has set it apart from other of my previous experiences and has kept me here enthusiastically.
Right. And I think it's a really important point that you just made, Ethan, that those core values, you could have, you've already been showing them in your life previous to this, but this is where it's so critical to do your research before you go into that interview, right? So if you know what those core values are that are important to Slalom, you're going to practice the thought process of where have I done this before? Where have I shown it before? Like Kelly said, it doesn't have to be a specific internship. This is the point where you say, I did this when I was working for Habitat for Humanity doing volunteer work, or, and Huskython, what we needed to do to build the funds, all of that. Nolan, do you have your hand up again? No? Okay. We do have one more question that says, oh, he's saying thank you for everything. Okay. Are you hiring data analysts right now? This is Hari, who actually, Hari, you were the first person on the call. So why don't you take yourself off mute for a moment and ask your question?
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. Hi, Kelly. My question is basically, I'm graduating this semester, and I'm doing a master's in business analytics and project management with a focus in data science. So I wanted to know if you guys are hiring data analysts right now or anytime soon.
Yeah, so in Hartford, we may not be. I still need to confirm that with the practice lead because initially he had said no, and then we're just getting a lot more opportunities. So I do have to check back in with him again. But I do know in our Westchester office in New York City, and I believe in Boston, they're all hiring for DNA or associate consultants. I need to get used to saying that new job title.
What about cover letters, Kelly? What do you think about those, especially if somebody's trying to show that they've got some of these core values, but it's not necessarily that apparent on their resume?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just going to be honest, Kathy. You know me, and direct. I don't love reading cover letters. I mean, I will. I would just honestly like the more brief, because when we review resumes, it's just, fast and furious because we have a lot going on. So I think that, just a really brief summary of, why Slalom resonated with you, and almost figuring out a creative way to tie those core values in, or call out a couple of like unique things, not just like if you Googled Slalom, what would come up. but
Yep.
really quick and brief, because I don't always, if I see like a long one, I'll just go right to the resume. So that's just me though. So it depends on the recruiters that you talk to, but that's just the way I operate.
Yeah. And I want employers to have the chance to be able to answer that question honestly, because I look at cover letters as a research experience. It's not about creating a letter that says I want to apply to the associate consultant role because I think I could add value to the company. It's what's the company looking for? What ties me directly to that? So to your point of, if you're going to do it, make it concise, make it relevant, make it so that the reader who kind of looks at this quickly and says, oh, there's actually something in here that's important for me to pay attention to. So I always ask you these questions, Kelly, because I know you're going to give me the honest answer.
Yes.
Count on that. All right. Do we, so we had a follow-up question from Hari asking if he could reach out to you. Hari, why don't you email me and then we can, Kelly can address it that way. I put my email
Thank you.
in the chat. All right. Do we have any other questions? This is your chance. All right. How about from my team? Any questions? Well, this is perfect. Oh, Judy, there you go. You're on mute.
I was trying to get my camera to go on. Sorry. Hang on, let me think if I can remember my question now. Oh, yeah. Hi, Kelly. I'm Judy Stewart. I don't think we've ever met, and hi, Ethan. I work as with this team at the Stanford campus, but of course now we're all virtual and all campuses. Anyway, I had a quick question, and that is, I believe that at the beginning that you mentioned that you might have something like 100 spots. You may not have that many now, but quite a lot of spots available. So how do you have that many spots available? Are people getting promoted, or that's the, I mean, I understand 9,000 is a big company, but I'm just curious as to how those spots occur.
Yeah, so we have filled, when I was referring to that 130 something number, that is collectively as all of our markets in the Northeast are hiring. And I think a lot of it has to do with, because we were on a hiring pause. And so kind of to Ethan's point that it's a good time to reiterate, basically our pause was because Slalom wanted to take care of our employees. And so even though we're one company, every market operates as its own entity financially. So Ethan and my bonus, it's tied to the Hartford's performance for the most part. And so when everything shut down, there were some markets that were having record sales years and months. It was crazy. And there were others that completely tanked, because think of, certain markets who had airlines as their clients, right? They had to pull all of their project work. And so Slalom went into this 3-phase process, and the first was called Protect, because in the history of the company, we have never had to lay off any employees since 2001. And, if you think about it, we opened right after September 11th and then through the financial crisis. So that was our big reason for just kind of pausing. We took advantage of everybody being at home. And so when there were markets that were selling work and we had to staff, we pulled from all different markets who had consultants, what we call them, between projects, on the bench. And so that was really why we paused. And again, to Ethan's point that he made earlier, Slalom just puts our people first. And so throughout this, now we're starting to see markets grow. So now we're starting to open markets back up, maybe some of the newer markets. So for example, in Australia, in the beginning of 2020, we opened up Melbourne and Sydney. And so they're kind of reaccelerating again now that they're back open. Specific to the Northeast, I think it's a mix of attrition. To be honest, I think people are getting different opportunities being remote, also promotional opportunities, but we are also selling a lot of work. And so I can speak from a recruiting perspective because I'm on the leadership calls for talent acquisition. in Hartford, we were right on target with our hiring predictions, but New York and Boston were way under because they've been selling so much work. So we're trying to like accelerate, and it feels like our wheels are spinning just trying to hire as many people as possible. But yeah, that global number is really a reflection of the growth and opening
Got
the
it.
markets.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we do have another question from Hari. He's asking what a typical day looks like for a data analyst, which is probably a tough question. You know, it's a tough way to know like which projects you're working on, but either one of you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I'm going to shoot it over to Ethan.
Typical day for data analysts. Again, Kathy, you're absolutely right. It depends largely on what project you are staffed on. I can speak from personal experience. It's a lot of days looking at code and doing various bug fixes for the environment, but I don't think that's representative of everybody's experience in DNA.
Right.
Let me see, I'm just reading this question. Also, is there a rotational/development program for new hires? So Hari, I will say there probably will be a time in anybody's interview process, especially if you're going for some kind of technology related position, where you'll be asked, if you were on the bench, what will you be doing? And the bench is the like loading zone for people who aren't staffed on projects. There are a ton of internal opportunities and also plenty of time to further your own skills and better yourself and make yourself more staffable. So a typical day for a data analyst who isn't staffed would largely revolve around pursuing certifications, looking for learning opportunities within Slalom. There's a whole host of they're called learning journeys, right, Kelly? Where you can access the internal portal, and there are tons of classes. There's a huge emphasis on making yourself meet the needs of the work that's coming in or the work that hasn't even happened yet. So if you aren't doing like the typical 8 to 6 or 9 to 5 client work, your typical day is going to be getting ready and seeing what is available within the office that you can assist in, especially those that can help build up Slalom's technology within. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Basically, I can say that there's a lot of learning opportunity and you get to learn every day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know in any of the projects that I've been thrown on, it's very much I don't know if UConn has this phrase of drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
Where you're brought on into slalom with the expectation that you can meet the expectation, and a lot of that is being thrown into the deep end, and with an incredible amount of support behind you, but the deep end nonetheless. And your day to day for a data analyst would be learning how to swim in that water. And a lot of times it requires burning the midnight oil. But at the end of the day, you know how to do everything. Like the scope of which I have learned in the past year is astronomical. And I'm sure UConn is doing an incredible job getting everybody ready, but man, slalom has taught me a lot too. So I'd say day to day for data analysts, work when you're working and learn when you're not. If that makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of what I hear and what you're saying, Ethan, is this is not the type of 9 to 5 job where you sit around and wait for somebody to send you an email and say, Ethan, do this.
No.
You are in control of what you need to be doing, and the expectation is that you're always going to be paying attention to what needs to be done, whether it's
Absolutely.
project or learning.
It's right there in the core values.
Yeah. I didn't write that one down, but
Yeah, and just to kind of chime in, I mean, another big part of the interview process is, consulting isn't for everyone, and you have to be a self-starter, literally. I mean, we do look for folks who have that entrepreneurial spirit, and there is a lot of ambiguity. So you have to be comfortable operating in the gray where you don't have all of the answers, and you're with your project team and you're trying to figure out everything. So that's another part of the interview process that we really try to probe at, because we do set you up for success with, going through and teaching you how to be a consultant, but you do have to have that kind of self-starter, startup-y, entrepreneurial spirit to you, and being comfortable not having all the answers and actually being comfortable being uncomfortable. So I think that's a Brene Brown thing that she said.
Yep.
Yeah, but.
And Ethan, there's a question for you from one of the students who I so appreciate that you wrote in here. I'm on mute, my kid is around me. We've had, in our own houses, we've got our dogs. Sue's usually got the cat that's climbing across the keyboard. So we are totally with you on all of that. But Ethan, that's a question for you. How did you reach out to Slalom, through LinkedIn or the career page?
Yeah, again, this is why I would preface this with saying that my experience isn't really indicative of the traditional career path to Slalom. Although I do think it's worth saying, Kelly, I ended up at a birthday party for a friend. We got there and it ended up being one of those where you show up at a bar and find out that it's like a restaurant with a long table and everybody's sitting there and you're all expected to buy entrees. And so I got sat across from someone who I didn't know, and we got to chatting, and now she is my people manager. We found out through conversation that we were in similar fields. I got to complaining about my work, as one does, and she said, well, it seems like you might be a good fit. Why don't I put you in touch with Kelly? And I don't know, I think it was 4 or 5 interviews later, I landed at the Hartford office. But I do think that while typical recruitment channels are leveraged highly within Slalom, there is also an emphasis on hiring those already attached in some way to the connective tissue of Slalom. So we are always actively looking for people who know people. And that's how I was brought in, is by making a connection out in the wild just by happenstance. But if there is somebody in a field that you want to pursue that is within the company already, I wouldn't say that's your singular point of entry, but it's always good to start a conversation to see what would be recommended and areas in which you can improve or focus on, things along those lines, just to plant seeds and show interest.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ethan. And I had run a report just out of curiosity a couple of weeks ago. And for the past 2 years, our biggest source of hire is employee referrals. And it's all of our hires each year have been over 50% of our hires are employee referrals. Slalom-wide, I believe it's around 30%. So it's very high.
Yeah. I mean, that's networking 101, right? That's what we always tell people. Like, you could do everything right, and then you walk into an elevator and you're standing next to a person that you realize is at a company you want to work for. And that's that sense of adventure. Because Ethan, if you weren't willing to sit next to a stranger at a birthday party and like open up and talk, you probably wouldn't be here with us.
And I would just one piece of advice too. I mean, as you're because I know it's hard now, right? You can't really go anywhere depending on your personal restrictions. But I would say, if you are going to reach out to Slalom employees just kind of blindly on LinkedIn, that's okay. But be strategic about who you're reaching out to and also how many people you're reaching out to. I've just had a couple of situations where I'm not even kidding, like 10 different employees have sent me the same person's resume because they were just kind of like going rogue and having all these conversations, which is great. But I also think that there's that healthy balance of just, take time and read on the website and be very specific around, which practice area you're interested in and, reading people's profiles and figuring out which market that they're in. So that's one piece of advice that I would give, just be kind of strategic about who you're contacting.
Mm-hmm. And Kelly, we've had a couple of the students that are on ask if they can forward me their resume to send it to you. Not sure that's the way that you would want to go with that. Would you like them to reach out through LinkedIn or a different way, or?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fine. I think, specific to Hartford, because it's interesting the way our talent acquisition teams work, where most companies, I would say, are kind of have a global talent acquisition team where we kind of have a dotted line to ours. So I strictly recruit for the Hartford market. I'm tied to other leaders in the Northeast. And so I would say, yeah, I mean, you can send me a note and let me know which locations you're interested in. For Hartford, we are just hiring for the cloud and the Salesforce academies. But again, happy to pass your resume along. And I do think that my colleague, Eric Hoffman, has been doing some work in the UConn Stanford office as well. So we kind of meet biweekly just to stay connected.
Christina, are you still on? I think Christina might be the person that was working with. There you are. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Yes. Hi, Kelly. How are you? I'm
Hi,
Christina.
good.
I work with Eric Hoffman in the
Okay,
Stanford
good.
office.
Perfect.
So I'm in touch with him. So thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So are you doing something different, Christina, with Eric? Like different promotions through Handshake, or how are you doing
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I work with Eric, and when he has opportunities, we do post them in Handshake. So we're working on that.
Okay. All right. So for those of you that are on, knowing that if you have my email, if there is something specific that Kelly mentioned that you're interested in, you can email it to me and I will reach out to Kelly. But to Christina's point, make sure that you are using Handshake, also watching for those positions that are being posted live. All right. Anything else? Because I so appreciate Kelly and Ethan's time. It has been absolutely wonderful for you to just get on here and free ball it, right? I mean, Kelly, you asked, do I want a PowerPoint? And I would take this type of conversation over and over 100 times. So I thank you for taking the time out of your day, for talking to the students that are on live. I so appreciate that you're here to engage with the employers. For the students that are listening to it later, all of this is relevant, right? So you've got insight into, if you are applying to Slalom, how to do it. Pay attention to what the insight is that's here. And we actually have another session coming up today at 4 o'clock with Lily Pharma. So all of you are welcome to join us again for that. And Kelly and Ethan, if there's anything on our side that we can do for you, we are here.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. This is great.
It was fun. All right, for all the students, thanks for joining us. We'll see y'all later. And for the career team, if you want to stay on for a minute with Ethan and Kelly, we can just say goodbye.